they can learn what we know. So we like to share our knowledge. And this time we made the topic from idea to knitwear product. So I will lead you through a short presentation, which will take about 30 minutes, I guess. And then I will show you an offer from Shift the Microfactory for the current workshops we are running there. And then we'll have enough time for more questions and answers in this channel. So it will take mostly about 45 to 60 minutes. And then, yeah. I would be very happy to get an exchange with you afterwards. So no, I need to find the right key. Yeah. So I'm Friederike Pfeffer. Actually, I started as a designer, for those of you who don't know me yet. I'm actually a designer and studied in various places in Germany. Then I moved to Holland, became a senior designer at Total Identity and worked then independently for my own offices for almost 2 decades. Then in like 10 years ago was the first time I saw a knitting machine, an industrial knitting machine, and I was super fascinated by what an industrial knitting machine does in its technical complexity with a simple thread. So about the possibilities, how to convert a simple thread of yarn into something amazing by using this technique of the industrial knitting machine. And I really got sucked into this and wanted to find out more. Since then, I'm mostly involved into how to turn ideas into knitwear programs. I did some knitwear programming courses, but I would not call myself an experienced knitwear programmer because that takes really special skills. But I see myself as a knitwear advisor. So I'm mostly working with design companies, with fashion designers, labels, and advise them how they can convert their ideas into knittable items. And then we closed the gap with Shift, our microfactory in Berlin. And there we can develop ideas into real knitwear garments. So we have the facilities there to knit really. We have 3 knitting machines. I will introduce it later as well, but we can turn really prototype stuff and make a small series of knitwear within this microfactory. So I'm here with my colleague Matthias from the Form team. So we are running this together. Yeah, and we will lead you through. So today, I will explain how you, as I think most of you are designers and want to get involved into knitwear, have some experiences in knitwear already. Maybe you can do a thumbs up for those of you who have experience with knitwear already and did some knitwear designs in the past. Are there some? So not too many? Okay. And so we usually start with the design, and I will guide you through that process, what it means to prepare a design for a knittable service. So what are the steps? What do you need to know? What are the decisions you need to make within that process? Because knitwear design is really different from fabric design, from wovens, designing wovens. And this I try to explain here. So what affects your design the most? You usually start with a sketch. So this is how most of the designers come to me. they have a drawing of an item that has kind of a knittable structure, but you don't know exactly what to transfer. So you've chosen pieces for your collection, you've chosen color and a specific kind of shape. But now this needs to transfer into a knitting product. So you start from the shape itself and how it fits, like material wise, and from the shape, material, and total fit into your collection. We, as knitwear designers, we start from the knitting structure, because the knitting structure really defines how your knittable item will appear in the end. And when you see here the difference between the rib structure, which I've shown in the first sketch, that can be converted, for example, into a 2x2 rib, into a 4x2 rib, or into a half cardigan, that are all similar structures in a way, that are all vertical rib structures, but they have a very different effect. So a 2x2 structure, for example, makes a very slim garment, because that squeezes together the structure. A 4x2 ribbed garment is a very plain structure that comes out not very stretchy, but like very plain. And a half cardigan structure does the opposite, that explodes itself in a way. So it's really it builds up from here. So if you want to have a more round structure, you would better go for a half cardigan structure. You see it here in the garments. So a 2x2 rib makes a very slim one. A 4x2 rib is a straight structure. A half cardigan does the opposite. So comes more out as a round structure. But in total, so you have to, from your shape itself, what you want to create, you have to define what knitting structure you choose. So that is very, very important for us as well, because if you want to create a more round structure, then you would need, if you want to create it with a narrowing structure like 2x2 rib, but you want it like round, then you would have to add a lot of increases in the loops within your structure. And that is possible, but that is very time consuming in terms of programming. So that would mean that the knitwear programmer, the one who converts it into a knittable item, that he needs a lot of skills to build the right structure. While with a half cardigan structure, you automatically get that result. So you need to know in advance which structure would fit your shape the most. A second ingredient you need to be aware of is how to transfer colors into knitwear. So we make the difference between jacquard and intarsia mostly. So there are different technologies as well, but the most common are jacquard and intarsia. If you want to convert something very pixelated with very many color changes into a knittable piece, then you usually choose for the jacquard. And if you want to have a very straightforward, like a logo design with not too many color changes or very defined patterns, then you choose for intarsia. The jacquard almost allows every structure to be converted. Every image can be converted into a jacquard structure. That is very a flexible tool to convert everything into a knittable item, while intarsia needs a lot of programming again. So you need to give the program really the sign from now, switch the color to blue, switch the color to yellow. And every time you switch the color, it needs a special yarn feeder. So you have to be aware of how many yarn feeders your knitting machine allows. So in case of you, like this image shows on the right, you have like roughly 6 different colors. That would mean you need 6 different yarn feeders already, only for the color changes. And an ordinary knitting machine allows mostly about 12 yarn feeders, while you have already some setup feeders for the start, for the waist, for everything you need to build up your knitwear program on the machine. So 6 color yarn feeders are already many, and then it would not allow, for example, a sleeve or an arm, a shoulder um, within a sweaters, because then you would need to double your yarn feeders. But that's a bit complicated. But as a basic rule, you need to know how many color changes do I have in one row, in one horizontal row, because in a knitting machine, we always knit horizontally, and then you need to count how many color changes. And as a rule, you could roughly say that uh, one row needs about not more than 10 color changes to allow intarsia. So if you have a logo, what you see like superhero, you would need to count in one horizontal row every time you go from blue to white to red to blue to white to red. And this makes already 6 color changes only for the left part. So you can't do this one in intarsia actually. A second thing with intarsia is that with every color change, you have a thread coming out of the garment, which needs manual um, sewing afterwards. So intarsia is mostly more costly than in jacquard, because with a jacquard structure, you knit all colors through evenly. So you can start with 4 colors and end with 4 colors, and in between, it will always knit all colors. Um, but an intarsia has a much flatter structure, because you only knit one color at a time. So if you want a very thin garment and very light one, then you would then again choose for intarsia. There are also different kinds of jacquards, which means if you want to convert any image, then the easiest one is a twill jacquard, because for a twill jacquard, you knit a structure in the front, you knit your image in the front, and then all other colors are knitted in the back evenly. So you get a pattern in the back, and in the front, you get your image. If you want, but you knit on double side, that means you get a thicker garment, because you knit on the front bed and the bed back in at the same time. For the float jacquard, is also very, very nice jacquard structure. All colors which are not needed in the front are knitted as a float in the back, as you see here in the middle, with the little stripes in the back. That means that you get a very light structure, because it's only knitted on one bed. So, but if you have many color changes, this is ideal for knitting, actually, because it doesn't need that much yarn. You save yarn, you get a light piece. But if you have long threads, so long floats in the back, um, they might catch, they might get stuck somewhere. So if you have a sweater with a very long thread, then you need to be aware that this might not be the most practical item, and you can only have floats in the gauge number of machine needles. So if you have, I will come to this later as well, but if you have heard about machine gauges, and if you talk about a 14 gauge machine, that means you have 14 needles you can cover with a float. That is the maximum you can get. So that would be like 14 pixels in one image you can have as a float run. Um, the third most common jacquard is net jacquard. Net jacquard means you have a pattern on the front and then it converts to the back mirrored. So you would have this one the same inside out. Let's say everything what's red on the front comes out white on the back. So if you have letters, they would convert mirrored in the back. That is also very nice, straightforward jacquard technique, which allows you to knit graphics very nicely, and you have a double face um, result. But it gives you also, it knits on two beds, so it's a thicker garment, and this is the piece which takes most of the yarn. So this is really yarn consuming. You get a very heavy garment in the end. So you need to consider also, if you need to talk about costs, then flow jacquard is definitely the quickest, the lightest, and the least yarn consuming. Net jacquard is for very solid structures. You also see the difference between the twill jacquard and the net jacquard, that the lines in the net jacquard are very straight, and in the twill jacquard, they are a little distorted. That is depending on the knitting technique, so there's nothing you can do about that. But with a twill jacquard, you have the most flexibility, so because you can just convert every image you want to a twill jacquard. Then the next thing, after you're thinking about the knitting pattern, you also have to consider about the assembly process when you bring something into production. And this is something you have to also be aware before you start programming it. Because the most simple process is still cut and sew, which means you have a large fabric of knitted, a large panel of knitted fabric, and you cut out your shape. So your paper pattern, and you cut it out and then you sew it together. The advantage of it is it's very fast. It's cheaper because you don't need any linking, and it's the most common way to produce fast and cheap knitwear. But on the other hand, you don't have flexibility in the seams, and you get a very, because the nice thing of knitwear is that you can influence all curves and everything what shapes your garment, you can influence by programming. And this is not possible with cut and sew because you have one structure which applies to all of your garments. And because you are sewing the seams, the seam is always very stiff. The one we are working with the most is fully fashion. Fully fashion means that you have the panels, your garment exists. In case of a sweater, it's the front, the back, the sleeve, and the collar. And you can give all panels, what I already said, the shape of the actual paper shape you had. And you would increase and decrease the number of rows. So in case you want to decrease your garment and narrow it, you would decrease the number of loops, so the number of needles, and uh, that will result in what we call fully fashion marks, what you see on the right here, that you really see where is your piece narrowed. So that is a very normal way to produce fully fashion, and you see in the fully fashion marks that this is produced in a very individual knitting program. All these panels will be linked by linking machine. There are different kinds of linking machine. We are working mostly with a round circular linking machine where every loop is really put on the linker and then it's sewn together like in a knitting machine. So it's a knitting process converted to a sort of sewing, which brings the parts together, but which is a really high quality sewing procedure. It costs minimum waste because you knit and shape. There's nothing like really leftovers from your production process, and it gives you maximum flexibilities, but you need to program it individually to your shape. That is, so you need a programming process accompanied to this. And the third method is mostly the seamless procedure. So the whole garment, as Shima Saiki machine is calling it, or the knit and wear process done by Stoll machines, which is actually the same. So both whole garment and knit and wear is a different wording for seamless garment. Seamless means it's knitted on the front bed and the back bed parallel, so at the same time. And this is how you get a whole sweater out of the machine in one process. There is actually almost no waste except from the start and the end point. So you can just rip it off and then you have your sweater already finished. There's no labor, there's almost no labor necessary afterward. So there's no linking, no hand stitching, just some loose threads, which needs some additional work. And there's a complex development process involved. That means you need a very, very skilled programmer, and the programmer needs to know where to put, really which loop needs to go where to make it complete, because every loop on the front relates to a loop in the back. So you really need a experienced knitwear programmer for this. Also, because you need both beds of the knitting machine for the knitting process itself. Um, you don't have much flexibilities in the knitting structure. So you cannot use knitting structures which needs both beds, actually, or only very simple ones. So jacquard, for example, which needs the both beds of the knitting machine, they are not possible within that seamless technique. These need to know in advance. Also, when you start the process, which machine do I need from my machine factory? So mostly you would contact the knitting factory and would ask them about the machines. So how to choose the right knitting machine? There are different kind of flatbed machines. Mostly we divide it in Stoll and Shimasaiki. This is for European standards. In Asia, we have a lot of other machines as well, which are very good products. But in Europe, it's mostly when you call a knitting mill, it's mostly the one or the other, or sometimes both. What I said before, Shimasaiki is most specialized on seamless. So if you want to create a seamless product, Shimasaiki would be advisable. If you want to create flatbed knitting, Stoll offers more flexibilities. So you can better choose a Stoll machine for complicated. It also offers weave-in structures or other techniques, which are very nice for a garment. So I would always say roughly Shimasaiki for seamless, and fully fashion go with the Stoll. Then if you have a circular knitting product like shoes, socks, you would go for a circular knitting machine. The big ones are mostly for really piles of fabrics which needs to come. So if you have an individual garment, um, you would better not go for circular knitting, and warp knitting is for even bigger um, uh, fabrics. So you would really produce loads of meters of fabrics for t-shirt production or whatever smallly. Or warp knitting. It also uses a different kind of knitting structure. So what I tell you about how to build up a knitwear program is only feasible for flatbed knitting machines. So then the next step would be which yarn fits your design. And then we go to the choosing process from which yarn do you want to choose to accompany your design. So what do you want to reach with your garment? So what is the function? And this is almost the first question you have to ask yourself when you think about choosing a fiber. Mostly people come to me and say, like, I want like a very colorful, using different colors for my design. And I want to choose a jacquard structure, but I want it very high quality. And why not choose a cashmere, for example? Then I always get back, like, if you choose a cashmere, then you have to respect the fiber itself, because the cashmere fiber is it's a very fluffy fiber and needs to explore itself on the after the knitting process. So you need to give it some air and room to give the fiber the possibility to explode in a way, to really open the fibers. When you want to knit cashmere, for example, as a jacquard pattern, then you bring all the different colors together in one loop, so it gets a very stiff, it becomes a very stiff structure, and then you don't give the fiber any more room to breathe, actually. So if you mostly that process already is very difficult, because cashmere always breaks with a jacquard knit. And then, so because the fiber itself is not stable enough to go through very um, fine loops, let's say. And if you knit jacquard, you knit it all in one hook. So that means you get a tense structure, and therefore cashmere is not really the right fiber, and it will break. But the biggest point is, even though it might be possible, if you wash it then afterwards, the fiber doesn't open, so you wouldn't get the result of a cashmere fiber. So you have to choose the right fiber for the knitting structure you choose in advance. Respect the characteristics of the fiber. Does it need an open structure? Can it be knitted very tensely together? And what do you need to know about the structure? If you come visit us at the MICROFACTOry, we have a lot of yarn samples there, and you can choose and you can see which technique would fit your design actually the most. Also, there are these thermic characteristics of fiber, of course, like animal fibers have all thermic characteristics. They give you warmth in the winter, but also cool you down in summer, like merino wool does, or also alpaca. Um, but if you want to choose for a more man-made fiber that has different characteristics as well, and gives you different purpose on different purposes, for example, that it cools you down, Tencel cools you down, or lyocell gives you a cool feeling in summer. So that is all very important, um, that you think together with the yarn from the beginning. What do you want your garment to achieve? Where do you want to use it for? Is it kind of an row you want which needs to cover something, or is it like really functional garment which needs to have characteristic? Then the yarn can really support, the knitting technique can really support. Another thing you need to consider with choosing yarn is what happens after usage. So what is the shrinking behavior, the washing behavior? For example, cotton shrinks a lot. So if you involve cotton in your garment process, you need like up to 20% more yarn because it shrinks altogether. Wool mostly shrinks about 5 to 10%. And then the man-made fibers, lyocell, modal, they almost don't shrink. The polycotton, cotton mix blend with polyester, they do not really have shrinking behaviors. Although they say shrink resistant with when you buy a fiber, when you buy a yarn, um, the behavior doesn't end. So if you buy a cotton which says shrink resistant, then it means you have to at least wash it once to get to the real characteristic of your garment. So you have to consider also the process you want to implement in the whole production process in advance. If you want to cut off money from the whole process because you want to have a uh, cost-efficient garment in the end, then you better choose for man-made fibers because they don't need this treatment afterwards. If you choose an animal fiber, you always would need kind of a treatment in the end. Then the second thing you need to know is about the yarn count. And mostly for wool, it's NM, and for cotton fibers, it's NE. That is the yarn thickness. And you have to choose mostly a yarn is like NM 224 or NM 24-2, which is the same. The 2 stands for number of plies, so the amount of plies. If it's 112 and then 112, then it's only one ply. When it's 224, then it's 2 plies which are threaded together. And if it's 4 ply, then it's 412 or something. And then it's 4 plies of NM12. NM means, so that's very mostly important to understand. The higher the number, the thinner the yarn is. So if you have an NM60, that means 60 meters of that yarn is 1 gram. So you have a lot of yarn for only 1 gram, actually. And if you have NM24, the yarn gets thicker, so you only need 24 meters to cover 1 gram. If you have a yarn which is 24/2, NM24/2, that means you have 2 threads of 24 yarn together, which makes it 12 NM yarn, because you double the amount of yarn, you double the thickness, so the yarn becomes thicker. So I hope this is understandable. That's always difficult to explain. Otherwise, I'm very happy to explain it again. Then the yarn also needs to cover to fit your machine count. So the yarn count needs to go into the hooks of your needles. What you see here on the right is a double bed knitting machine. So we have 2 beds with each needles, and the needle hook, where the loop comes in, they need to catch your yarn. So the yarn cannot be much thicker than the needle head. And then you also need to consider that sometimes the needle head needs 2 loops of yarn, depending on your knitting structure. If you knit only a single jersey structure, then you only need one loop at a time. But if you knit a double bed structure, then you need to catch more loops. So it doubles up the amount of threads in the needle head. So what does this mean again? If I have a 7-gauge machine that means on one gauge of the machine, which is 2.54 centimeter, I have 7 needles. That is a very coarse machine. So I have only 7 needles in 2 centimeter. When I have 80 gauge machines, it means on this that means on this same length of the machine, I have 80 needles. So it's much, much finer. Then you roughly can say that if I have an NM 230 yarn, which would transfer then 230, as I explained before, would mean NM15, a count of 15, that would go into a 14-gauge machine, into a 12-gauge machine, something around this. This is roughly how you can translate it. So a thicker yarn goes into a low gauge machine, a thinner yarn goes into a fine machine. You can always combine threads to a thicker yarn, but not the other way around, of course. So if you choose a thick yarn like NM 3500, which means 3.25, it's a very thick yarn which can only work in a very coarse gauge. Is this logic for everybody? I hope so. Yeah, so you choose your yarn, you choose the characteristics of your yarn, and you choose the right machine for your yarn, also depending on the knitting structure and how often do I need to change my needle bed to catch the yarn. So what is still possible within that machine? This is now already the end. So what I need to know to cover my whole production process is first getting the knitting structure finished, then convert it into decide what kind of product do I want to knit with it, what is the characteristics of my product, how can I convert it to a yarn, which yarn fits to the garment itself, and then choose the right machine to knit it. What we do at Shift, I show you a little clip. This is how we work. So these are industrial knitting machines. This is an unravel machine where we test circular knitting as well. So circular knitting means unraveling and re-knitting it again. This is a process we are doing in a research project. And this is actually a linking process. So how these parts are linked together with the circular linking machines. And then, so there you see that every loop has to go onto a needle to be catched by the yarn itself. And that is the threading process of a knitting machine. So before knitwear process start, the program goes onto a knitting machine and then it's converted into your garment, what Francesca is doing here. So this is what we cover at the MICROFACTOry itself. And this brings me to our offer. So if you want to learn more about this whole procedure of how to create your garment, how do you want to transfer your knitting piece into a knitted item, so from idea to the real product. We teach you how you can do this. We can give you an overview, like on the machine, to understand the full knitwear process. How do you have to start? What do you need to think of when you start designing a knitwear piece, what are the mistakes people are usually doing? What can you do to cut the prototyping loops? Because the more you know, the more you support the knitwear programmer to uh, convert your design into the knittable item. Also, if you talk a lot to manufacturers, this helps you a lot to cut down the process and to make it much more efficient. So align the design and the whole process with the production processes within the company, and that makes results in much better design choices. So how can you more efficiently um, talk to your producers? How can you prepare something for deliver it for your production company in the end? And that saves you in the end, again, cost in the whole process. You can develop the garments more efficiently. They build up easy and knit easy, so you can produce your garment very efficiently. So because of this, we are offering now a workshop, Knitwear Inside Out. The next one is September 3 to 4 and November 19 to 20. So it's a 2-day workshop where we'll show you everything within the microfactory from the idea to industrial production. We go with you. We really deep dive into the machines. We show you what are the machines capable of, what can you do within the microfactory, and how can you really work with different kind of yarns. You will come out of this workshop with a swatch, which you have co-designed with our knitwear programmer together, so you will really have hands-on time on the machine itself. Um, we now offer it because of this special occasion of the webinar with a 25% code. So if you go to that QR code, you can also photograph it quickly and book a workshop by tomorrow evening. Then you can have 25% of the workshop. The price is, or it doesn't say the price, it's 490 euros. So with a 25% discount, you will get it for 369 euros. So that is our offer for the Knitwear Inside Out. And we also offer the knitwear programming course, which is a complete full week of knitwear program learning. So you learn how to write, how to understand the software of Stoll knitting machines. And this is what you saw in the video. So we only work with Stoll machines, and you will get to learn the basics of the Stoll flatbed knitting programs. How to convert each stitch into the knittable item. You will test it yourself onto the machines. We will have different fibers available where you can test it. We will test different structures. So you really learn to think as a knitwear programmer. What do you need to know? How do you can really involve your knitting skills into becoming a knitwear programmer? After that, you will be able to design simple things yourself using a knitting machine. If you're familiar already with domestic knitting machines, that will help you a lot. But also, if you have no skills, you can easily translate knitwear patterns to knitting machine software. So this is a full week course, which we offer for 1,290 euros. And also the same with this programming course, we will give you a 25% discount until tomorrow evening. That's not correct what it says, because today is the 11th, right? Until the 12th of June, you will get a 25% discount if you book it now, and that will mean it's covered by, it will come out as 980 euros, I think, Um, these courses are um, recognized as official learning courses. So if you are located in Germany, then you can fully it's fully tax deductible as an official working educational program. And also, the Federal Ministry of Germany offers you, as if you are an independent designer, to cover up to 90% of the cost of a knitwear workshop here if you are located in Germany. So if you are interested in these kind of benefits, just reach out to me and I will give you the right link to apply for these programs. That is like really incredible way how to participate with almost no cost because it's all covered. And now it's getting like really crazy because we thought these courses, they build up on each other. So we have the Knitwear Inside Out, which will give you the first insights, how to use the machines, how to choose the right fabrics, really what affects your designs. And then the knitwear programming, how can you convert it into a knittable program? If you're really thinking that is something for me, I want to dive deep into these kind of processes, I want to learn how these processes are built up, then we really would advise to book both of the courses and to then we give you the offer of 1,250 euros both courses together. First course, 3 and 4th of September. Second course, 21st to 25th of September. So you would have 7 days completely in our microfactory in Berlin and join us for this 7 days. So that is really like it doesn't get better than this one. So this is an incredible offer, also valid until tomorrow, not today, tomorrow evening. I will keep this open for you. If you scan this code, um, you can come directly to that offer. So now we are done. And we come to our question and answer round. So if you want to know something more about whatever topic, now is the time to raise the question. If you have question about the courses, if you have question about the processes. So usually what I wanted to answer still, the usual process of knitwear design, if you want to have something developed individually, is come to us with your sketch, with your ideas of yarn, with your ideas of knitting patterns, and with a check sheet which gives all of the measurements, and then we can advise the best which technique would fit to your concept. But these are the three things, the three component you should be aware of if you want to start with knitwear design. So any questions here? You can just jump in. If you have any questions, please go ahead and don't be shy. That's the moment.
There's a question in the chat from Christine. She asks, is it worth doing both? I'll be traveling from Ireland, so I guess that's referring to doing both the workshops.
Yeah, that really depends on what you want to achieve. So if you want to get more into knitwear programming, if you want to get involved and if this interests you, it's worth doing both. So if you are only doing knitwear programming, I would only advise if you have already skills in knitwear design. And if you know how to transfer these techniques, knitting patterns, to a knittable piece. If you know about stitches, stitch tensions, yarn behaviors, then you could already start with knitwear programming. If you need to know more about knitting techniques, what structure fits to what design, and all these principles, all these production processes within the whole process of making your garment, then I would definitely advise both. So, because
Um,
with the Knitwear Inside Out, you get the skills of really building up and understand the procedure behind it.
Do you, in the week-long program, do you provide any training on how to send a tech pack and pattern to your production factory?
That is already covered in the Knitwear Inside Out program, in the Knitwear Inside in the two-day course. So
Okay.
this is the result of this is really what comes out as a tech pack, and what do you need, what information do you need to give your knitting company. And the knitwear programming really is more into detail, into the knitting structure. And if you are interested in working with machines, that is the right course for you then.
And then in terms of, say, accommodation for the week and all that kind of thing, can you provide some help in where to stay?
Yeah, definitely. So we are located in the middle of Berlin. There are a lot of hotels around, also cheaper hotels and more expensive hotels. We have a voucher code of several hotels in the area, so we can definitely help with looking for something.
Okay. Thank you.
Hmm. You're welcome. So I got another question here in the chat. Is Stoll still operating? Didn't they close the operations? That's a very good question. Actually, to be very, very honest, we all don't know. So they closed their factories, that's for sure. They will close their operations end of this year, but nobody really knows how it will continue, because right now they are still in the process of acquisition. So somebody will take it over, but who will take over the machinery part or the software part? Nobody knows until now. So that's very interesting for us too. Um, I think, in my opinion, and that's very personal, that won't affect the mechanical part of stone machines, because all the maintenance of the machines are covered by different companies already. So, and the machines, since they're like very mechanical, they will continue um, their work for the next 50 years, I guess. That is won't be a problem. So every company with stone machines can just continue their process. But for the software part, we don't know how this develops. So if this will remain the status quo or if this will going to be further developed. We as Ito, I'm also part of Ito, we found a way how to drive through it. So how to not use the Stoll software. And this is also a good way how to handle it. But this we don't know yet.
Just one other question. If we complete the courses, is there an opportunity to be introduced to some other manufacturers in Germany? Currently make everything in Ireland with a really good mill, but sometimes I need more mills to work with. Just wondered, would that be
Yeah.
part of the course? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's not really part of the course, but of course we can provide knitting mills with. We have a very good network in Germany, so we have bigger, smaller mills in Germany and Europe. We can help out with. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hmm. So more questions regarding the workshops or regarding something else? So then I think we are done already. So let me know if you have any further question, then you can reach out to me through my email address. We recorded, so I look at Matthias, we recorded this webinar, right? So you will get a link from me to review that whole webinar later. We will upload it somewhere. and then we can yeah meet each other at the workshops, hopefully, or see each other again at the next webinar. So I wish you a wonderful lunch break and hopefully see you again soon.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thank you so much.